When many people think of Israel, this is what enters their mind. Apartheid of South Africa, pre-civil rights, U.S. segregation. But this is the real Israel. Even before the end of apartheid in South Africa, and even before the success of the civil rights movement. South Africa's former President DeKlerk, who ended apartheid in South Africa, stated explicitly, Israel is not an apartheid. The libel that Israel is an apartheid is not only a gross misrepresentation of the actual situation in Israel, but it also negatively impacts Palestinians. It's also disrespectful to true sufferers of real apartheid. Let me be clear. While I don't claim Israeli society is perfect and void of social discrimination, comparable to what exists in the US, the claim that Israel is an apartheid sounds like a joke, insulting to the intelligence of anyone who's aware of the situation in Israel. We're talking about political divisions here, not racial or ethnic divisions. Having grown up in a non-Jewish household, having no bias in favor of Jews and no bias against Palestinians in my upbringing, I entered the Jewish world with objective eyes. Having now lived in Israel for more than 10 years, and having visited all parts of Israel, West Bank settlements, Palestinian villages, and traveled to Ramallah on a Palestinian bus line, I think my testimony is worth hearing. Now, Israelis and Palestinians both suffer great loss due to the current political conflict. My goal is not to provide a solution, but to dispel one of the many claims made in the anti-Israeli camp, that of apartheid. This claim is a gross distortion of facts, and also perpetuates the conflict by strengthening hatred on both sides. Apartheid was originally a term used in reference to the racist South African policies before the end of its racial segregation. Apartheid refers to government policies requiring separation of individuals based on race and ethnicity. It's true, apartheid exists in the Middle East. The Human Rights Watch website indicates that Lebanon enforces laws prohibiting its Palestinian residents from various professions. In Saudi Arabia, all of Mecca is off limits to non-Muslims. And perhaps most ironically, not only has Palestinian and Jordanian leadership succeeded in restricting Jews from praying on the Temple Mount, the holiest site on earth to the Jewish faith, but they, the Palestinian Authority and the Jordanian government, also prohibit Jews from even drinking from the public water fountains on the Temple Mount, as just last month reported by the Times of Israel. Indeed, the Palestinian Authority and Hamas have repeatedly publicly asserted that a future Palestinian state would be Jew-free. Unbelievably, as the BBC, the New York Times, and even Al Jazeera have reported, Palestinian law prescribes a death penalty for Palestinians who sell land to Jews. Compare that to Israel's 20% Israeli Arab population, who are assured equal rights, and 70% of whom apparently appreciate their situation in Israel enough to not want their towns annexed by a new Palestinian state, according to the Arab Center for Applied Social Research. Now, it's important to understand the difference between Israeli Arabs, or Israeli Palestinians, and non-Israeli Palestinians. Even now, while crying apartheid, more than 100,000 non-Israeli Palestinians commute to Israel for work and for education. While in Israel, they have equal access to public buses, public restrooms, and so forth. Contrast this to Jews who are prohibited from entering the Palestinian Authority-controlled areas. Yet Israeli Arabs are free to roam both Israeli and Palestinian territory. Now, where are the apartheid-type policies here? On which side of the camp? Checkpoints run by the Israeli border control are not created equal and are not indicative of apartheid. The level of security scrutiny at each checkpoint is relative to the security threat of that checkpoint's location. The level of threat is directly related to the free will of the Palestinian Authority's government and local population. As hostility lessens, the level of security scrutiny lessens, no different from protocol in most countries. Areas where hostility has lessened, security measures have lessened. and much of the security wall has been removed as nearby Palestinian populations have become less volatile. Palestinians want their own state, no? Since when does an independent state not have borders? Are Canada and the US apartheid states for having border control? Unless, of course, those making the apartheid claim also claim all of Israel for a future Palestinian state, desiring that Israel cease to exist altogether. In that case, you can understand their opposition to the current borders and border checks. In fact, this appears to be the case. The Washington Institute reports that 60% of non-Israeli Palestinians aim to acquire all of Israel as part of their future Palestinian state. Only 20% were in favor of a Palestinian state that assures equal rights to Jews and Arabs. My only point here is that the conflict has everything to do with behavior and political ideology, rather than race and ethnicity. Only the heartless and ignorant would deny the sufferings of Palestinians and Israelis. Those who truly care for Palestinians would serve them better were they to acknowledge the real causes of this suffering, rather than only further complicating the political situation by spreading the false claim of supposed Israeli apartheid. What we need are leaders who acknowledge facts to the same extent that they yearn for peace. Then the common aspiration of decent Jews and decent Muslims can be reached: love of God and man and peace.